It's important to me. And at the same time, this recent journey of being part of this childlessness community has been interesting for me, and I found it's been helpful to me. And I'm grateful to Michael and his people who started that Facebook group, because that's helped me sort of crystallize my thoughts around not being a parent. I realize that there's a lot of people out there, I wasn't oblivious to it before, but a lot of people who are going through a lot of pain in their world because of their particular situation. And it must be very, very hard for a lot of people who really, really, really want to be parents and fit in with the world around them.
Hello and welcome to the Full Stop Podcast, a childless community podcast with Michael Hughes, Berenice Smith and me, Sarah Lawrence. If you're new to this podcast, we're here to delve beneath the surface of the childless identity, to cover what's going on in the wider community and to look at the topics that really affect us. Our goal is to help and support those of you out in the community by sharing the stories and the voices that make up our narrative, so that you too can begin to find yours. We also aim to inform and educate those who aren't members of our community so that they can begin to understand and support those people in their lives who are facing a life without children. In this episode, we're joined by Michael Barnett, OAM, Order of Australia, who is an activist and advocate for the LGBTQI+ community, but also a member of the childless community. Michael was awarded his Medal of the Order of Australia on Australia Day 2023 for his services to the LGBTQI+ community. So sit back, relax and enjoy this episode all about Michael's work, where it meets the childless community and what it brings to us as we continue on our journey through invisibility.
Michael, would you like to introduce yourself to our audience? We've got some people actually in our live audience here who will be popping some questions in, but to our listeners as well for when we record the podcast. Would that be okay?
Yeah, for sure. My name's Michael Barnett and I live in Melbourne, Australia. I'm 56 and married to Gregory. We've been together now for 17 years and I work in a job that with a company that makes medical devices for optometrists, and I'm a customer support manager, and that's my day job. It's a very fulfilling and full day job, and I come home at night completely exhausted, but I love it and it's great. I live with Gregory and we have a part-time dog called Buddy. Part-time because we have her part of the time and her other owner has her the other part of the time, although funny thing is that she said, Marcel, the owner of the dog, said, feels like I'm the halfway house for your dog because Buddy prefers to spend time at our house and not her actual house.
Buddy, really, honestly.
She gets to lick the tray from the smoked salmon at our place and she doesn't get that at her place. So you see, that's why she likes it here.
That could be a deciding factor with my dog as well. Yeah, I think she would definitely go for that. My dog's allowed to lick the odd plate here and there if no one's looking, so I'm the favourite human. Yeah.
And she jumps up on the bench, like paws up and everything. So anyway, she's a lovely little dog in our life, and that's a joy we've had in the last couple of years. So we're thrilled with Buddy when she does visit us, and we have as much time with her as possible. And what else can I say? Is there anything else you'd like to know about me right now?
What do you do outside of work?
Outside of work,
because
I'm a very busy person in my life.
I know you do some things.
Yeah. So look, I sometimes put it that my day job funds my activism. Over many, many years, I've been very passionately involved in a lot of activism and organising around queer rights, around LGBTIQA+ activism and standing up for the rights of vulnerable people who have often been marginalised by society, who struggle to find their identity and have a place in the world. And took me a long time, to the age of 26, to work out where I was in the world. And that wasn't just around my sexuality, it was actually just around growing up and being a person. But I've, in all of my journey, I decided that I didn't want other people to have to go through the type of experience I had doing it all by myself without any assistance. And so I've put a lot of time and effort and personal money into doing things together with other people and often by myself just to raise awareness around the discrimination that queer people face in the world, and that sometimes other people could help to make our lives better. It's not a big ask, really.
Absolutely agree with that. Completely agree with that. Can I just go back to one observation before? I think there's some stuff that we'd like to kind of explore a bit more with you. But there's one point at the beginning that you said that I picked up on, which is your day job funds your activism.
Yes.
And of all of the things that we could pick out from that, I just grabbed that because I know from lots of conversations, and my own experience actually as well is true. And I think probably Sarah and Michael, you might chime with this a bit as well. I know our audience do, is that some of us can be in positions where we might not be necessarily happy or as content as we would like to be in the stuff that pays the bills. But we can use that in order to do other adventures and other things. Would you say that that's something that's true for you in that statement? You know, you said you come home exhausted, but actually, do you find that it's fulfilling because you can then go and do so much more campaigning, and that allows you the freedom to do that? Would you say?
Yeah, I come home from work and that's the end of my work day, but then I've got a whole lot more stuff that I do, whether it's writing letters to the paper or whether it's doing a survey or doing some artwork or this or that. You know, when I say artwork, designing a document or a flyer or a press release or whatever. I'm not a huge activist, not like the likes of Peter Tatchell, who's somebody I hold in great regard, but you know, or Rodney Croom in Australia, but I do my little bit, very little bit. And sometimes these things require a little bit of money, and I'm not flush with cash, but I'm prepared to put my own money, pull my hand into my pocket and pull out my wallet to pay for the things that need to be done because, and it's not often and it's not all the time, but it's things that are important to me because I think that it can make a difference to people's lives. And if I can make a little bit of difference or if I can do something that can then change someone's opinion, then I've got nothing to lose. And I'm quite happy to do it. And whether it's also, together with my husband, Gregory, who's brought me along on an interesting journey in life because he's opened my eyes to a lot of interesting things and ideas. And together with him, we've done a lot in this space together. And we do it together very well. And he can go off and organize something and make it happen, and I can organize something, make it happen. And together we've done this really big thing. And all of a sudden things come together, and it's it might or it might not go anywhere, but it's been an effort that we've enjoyed doing. And I get a lot of joy out of spending the time together with Gregory, doing something where he might design a survey and we might send it out on a mailing list and set up a website, or he'll do a database and I'll put all the data into it. When we're doing our elections here in Australia, whether it's federal, state or local government, I might do a survey of the candidates and rank them on their level of acceptance, and he'll design a website and I'll put the data into the database that he's just designed. So this is the sort of thing we do, and we sort of feed off each other's enthusiasm, and it's his joy to put all this together with me. So, I guess this is how we make a change to the world around us.
Can I just say that I think you're underplaying this a little bit there, Michael, because you have been recognised with the Order of Australia medal. So that is not a small thing. So I just want to bring that in. I don't want to embarrass you, and I know you're being humble, but I just want to recognise that you do a lot.
Yeah, look, Michael, thank you for that. I'm very humbled by that. I was nominated by some people, and some people sent in submissions to a process, and people thought that I was, had done things in the past merit-worthy, and I accept that, and I'm very grateful. It's not the outcome that I sought, but it was a wonderful outcome to receive, and I was very humbled, and I wore the badge actually just 3 nights ago, Thursday night. My husband and I were nominated for, and we won the Sir John Monash Awards in our local government area and Monash Council LGBTQ+ Leadership Award for the work that we've done as residents of the city of Monash.
Congratulations.
We put a lot
Congratulations.
in. We do a lot. Oh,
That's amazing. Thank you.
Gregory's given a lot to Monash Council on the LGBT reference group, and he's currently the co-convener of the Victorian Pride Lobby, and I've done a lot with a lot of other things over 2 or 3 decades, so we do put a lot in. We take it very, very seriously. What drives me, my personal motivation, is to make sure that young people don't take their lives, and that's a very important thing for me, and that's the only reason I do this, what I do, because I believe that it's important for young people to have hope and optimism in their lives rather than feeling down. If I can, as I like to put it, if I can remove reasons for young people to hate themselves, then they'll just feel like everybody else.
Such a powerful message, Michael.
Hmm.
Are you able to talk a little bit about what first brought you to activism? Because was it like a process that you've been through to get to this point?
It took me 16 years, Sarah, to come to terms with my sexuality. I was around the age of 10, and without being able to really tell anybody, I didn't have the words for it, and the people around me kind of didn't have the words, although my brother was very perceptive, and he kept asking me over many years, he said, "Michael, are you gay?" And I just couldn't come to terms with that. And it was really just something that I wasn't emotionally ready for. I think it's not unknown that men in particular emotionally don't really mature till mid-20s. And I just was in a headspace where I wasn't comfortable with the world. And I had a lot of anxiety, and I struggled a lot, probably as many teens do. And I just didn't enjoy many of those years. I didn't have relationships. I didn't date. I didn't have too many friendships. And I felt isolated and lonely in the world. And it's a hard experience for me. Well, it was at the time. And I guess it was just that whole journey of finding yourself that I kind of realized that I really didn't want other people to have to go through that themselves. And I actually see these days, and particularly in Melbourne around me, that younger people, perhaps at government schools, are far more open these days and accepting of diversity. Maybe in some religious schools there's a lot harder paths to deal with that sort of part of your personality, but I think when you're not faced with religious forces that tell you you're sinful if you want to be in a same-sex relationship or if you're gender diverse, I think it's a lot easier these days for people to come out and accept themselves as gay or bisexual or transgender or lesbian or pansexual or whatever identity people feel most comfortable with and however they want to present themselves to the world. And I think there's so much to gain from just being yourself, and you can get more out of life. And people live fuller lives when they can be their authentic selves. And I just think that if I can be part of helping people do that, then why not?
Wow, it's been a hell of a journey then, hasn't it? It sounds like you really turned it into something really positive for other people.
I was really fortunate though, when I did confront my sexuality and did tell my family and friends, they were overwhelmingly supportive, and that was in the mid-1990s. I think perhaps these days it's perhaps a little easier for people. I don't know what it's like in other parts of the world, and right now there are parts of the world where it's becoming a little bit harder to be yourself.
Yeah.
Perhaps our friends in the USA might be experiencing that right now, but I think here in Australia it's a relatively safe and relatively accepting place, and I think you can be yourself a lot more easily here now than you could years and years ago. And the law doesn't criminalize homosexuality, and it doesn't criminalize a lot of behaviors in the past that were once considered criminal. And there's been a lot of redress over the years, and apologies have been made. And I think we've come a long way, and we've learnt a lot, and perhaps we won't go back down that path, but we always have to be vigilant, because there are always people trying to take those rights away from us.
And that's really important, as well as it to note that kind of that vigilance, but also allyship, I think, as well. That
Absolutely, yes.
When you say your family were supportive of you, that's my experiences of some of the stuff I've done outside of the Full Stop has been in EDIB facilitation, so learning more about that. And I very recently went to a weekend workshop about trans awareness and being a good ally, what it means to be an ally to people who are trans. And it was quite shocking, some of that data and actually the actual stories from people, real stories from people, because we can talk a lot about data, I think, but actually this is people we're talking about and their lives and how to be a good ally, but also to be mindful of that. As you say, there's parts of the world where it's unsafe to be queer. I think people can be quite ignorant sometimes. They're not necessarily aware perhaps of some of the challenges that can be faced and how people can actually be a little bit more aware, I think, as well.
Look, I think it's all over the place. I mean, tonight we went walking, my husband and I went walking along the beachfront here in Melbourne, and just in and amongst the throng of people, and there were a lot of people, and for the most, and when we go out, we like to hold hands, which is something we find quite enjoying, and a lot of other people hold hands too. But it's an interesting experience because I don't think too many people who are out in public are used to seeing two men holding hands. And I think it kind of makes people say, oh, that's interesting. I haven't seen that before. Or, oh, I'm not quite sure how to look or respond or react. Or perhaps it makes people feel uncomfortable or not. And kind of go through life feeling that people don't really see us and what we are and who we are. And with this sort of thing that's sort of often demonized in the media. And often people don't really encounter the sort of diversity that we are. We sort of often exist in plain sight, I think, is sort of a way to describe it, that we are here, but you don't often see us. And we are real people, and we have real lives and real emotions, and we do the same as everyone else. And I think people just don't necessarily understand. And a lot of the people I'm talking about that I saw tonight around the place come from perhaps communities where it's considered taboo to be in a same-sex relationship or to be gender diverse. And that can be challenging for people in those worlds. And I was part of an organisation, and I'm still a member, but I was actually actively involved for many years, the Australian LGBTQ Multicultural Council, AGMC for short. And it's an organisation that's been running now since 2004 or thereabouts here, and we mainly based in Melbourne, but it is national now, and tries to bring people from multicultural communities who are LGBTQ to provide education and awareness and connectedness to people from those communities, where it can often be quite challenging. And I think talking about our diversity is a start, and seeing us portrayed in a positive light in scenarios where, for example, you can see two men or two women or just two people who aren't your typical heterosexual couple together with maybe a family, maybe children, and just doing regular things and being regular people, and not dressed in some outrageous outfit necessarily. There's anything wrong with outrageous outfits, but we can be the same as everybody else, and we are the same as everybody else. But yet sometimes it can be challenging for people to understand that and to accept that, and their faith might tell them that we're, taboo or unacceptable. In all communities, we exist everywhere. And funnily enough, I was listening to a story on our ABC radio here, Australian Broadcasting Commission radio. They were talking about up until Australia was settled by the British, the Indigenous people had queer identity for tens of thousands of years here. And it was only till Christianity came along and sort of stamped that out. But they had all sorts of interesting and wonderful ways to live, and brother boys and sister girls, and all sorts of queer diversity in Indigenous worlds here in Australia, going back tens of thousands of years. And that's sort of, quite eye-opening when you think about that's been here forever.
Yeah. I went to a talk a couple of months ago with the University of Cambridge, and it was a talk about trans people and about how those relationships actually predate Christianity. And there are so many examples in lots of things, like cave paintings all the way through to kind of pre-recorded or early history that it happened. And it's really kind of when you start to bring in kind of other elements that kind of seek to kind of, I'm going to be polite about this, label and categorize, that then people then become excluded as well. But it was fascinating talk. I don't think it's publicly available, but it was really, really good. And it was really interesting that actually when we look to history, there is so much more diversity in ancient history than we perhaps realised as well. Yeah.
One of the things So sorry, no, go on.
No, I just want to say thank you for answering that question. I found that really interesting. Thank you.
One of the things I think is hard for people is that when they see, and this perhaps talks to the podcast, one of the things they see when they see a gay couple or perhaps a lesbian couple is they think you'll never, and this when I came out perhaps to my parents, I told them when I was gay, and perhaps the thing that bothered my mother perhaps the most at the time was there'll never be children. And maybe that might have been the case, or maybe it's often the case, or maybe it's sometimes the case. But in fact, invariably these days is not always the case. In fact, one thing that's quite interesting is that when gay men or women become parents, it's never by mistake, and the kids are always wanted and loved. And it's quite a journey for a gay couple or a lesbian couple to become parents. A friend of mine mortgaged his house so that they could have a surrogate child. You don't go down that path lightly. And they've now got 2 or so children, and the most wonderful family and the most amazing children. And I've never seen more loved, more brilliant children in my life. Yes, makes me sort of, wonderful just thinking about that and them, which wasn't my story, but it was their story. And I love the fact that that happened for them.
Thank you for sharing that, because I hadn't thought about it in those terms, but yes. And there's a parallel, I think, to that narrative, I think, that comes up in childless communities as in general of that you didn't try hard enough. But actually, my answer to that is that you couldn't ever find anyone who tried more harder to be a parent because it just didn't just happen by accident. It never happens by accident. Yeah. There's a lot of parallels there as well.
Michael, I'm really interested to sort of get your view on how your work with youth interplays with being childless.
Well, look, just to clarify, so I don't work with young people, but I do a lot of work or activism to benefit young people. Over many years, I've I guess tried to work with people around my age or younger to think about what it would be like to, I guess, raise children for them who with a more open mind, and that's what my hope is. But also at the same time to give young people hope and optimism for themselves. Myself, very much childless, not by choice. Would for many years had wanted to become a parent, but it never happened. And it wasn't perhaps till around the year 2000, I think. So, about 25 years ago, that I really started thinking this would be something I'd like to do. But as a boy and as growing up into my teens, I'd never really thought about parenting because it didn't make sense to me in my head that I could ever be in a situation where I could be a parent. And I didn't know that. I never thought that I'd ever be in a relationship with a man, and I knew I'd never be in a relationship with a woman, at least not one that I wanted to be in, because I didn't. So knowing that I was gay, or I didn't identify as gay up until the age of 26, but before then, knowing that I wasn't attracted to women, made it sense to me that I couldn't become a parent. So I'd never thought about that in a positive way growing up. And I think that's really interesting because these days you can hope to become a parent, even as a single woman, but becoming a parent as a gay man now, yes, you can do that. And I think the world's changed, at least here in Australia, so that young people could have hopes and aspirations to be a parent, even if they're in a same-sex relationship, be celebrated by the world around them and the community around them and supported. But growing up for me, I never had that vision, and it wasn't part of my trajectory in life, so I never thought about it. Until, I guess, as I said, in my sort of mid-20s, I kind of thought about it. And then I wanted that, and it never happened. And it never happened for a lot of different reasons. And none of them were for lack of hope or trying or desire. It was always opportunities that never happened, or doors that closed, or discovering that I had fertility issues, or relationships that failed, and one thing and another, culminating in the most wonderful relationship of my life with a person who already had 2 children and didn't want any more. You don't get rid of the most wonderful person in your life just because you're not going to have children with them. But that kind of made it rather poignant and bittersweet for me. So there's a lot of, and we could go into all of that, and I'm quite happy to go into all of that. But in a nutshell, that's kind of where I am now as a 56-year-old man who realizes I'm beyond the time where one would practically become a parent, but having to live with that reality and have come to terms with it. Not easy.
No, absolutely
not. I do have
not.
2 grandchildren, ironically.
Yeah. Sort of many ways. It's not the ways that people think, paraphrasing Jodie Day, but it's not as simple as didn't, couldn't. It's so much more than that. There's lots of nuances. Yeah.
Oh, for sure. And look, I think, my journey is perhaps unique, but it's probably overlaps with a lot of people's experiences. And I'm sure people can resonate with some of what I've experienced, and whether you're in a same-sex relationship or not, none of what I have done is perhaps unique to gay people. Whether you've got fertility challenges, or you've got a person in your life who's an alcoholic, or you've come out of a loveless relationship, or whatever. These are all, and you wouldn't want to bring a child into that type of relationship, really. Hopefully people think about these. Some people don't, but I certainly would never want to bring a child into a relationship where the relationship didn't have space for children. That's,
Yeah.
And with the march of time, of course, you don't then want to consider being a parent at a time when you're probably a little bit too old for it.
Yeah, that too. Yeah, there's a lot of things there, I think, which I'm with people, as you say, we have more in common than perhaps we may think. I think in terms of those sadness as well, it's a hard one to quantify, isn't it? Yeah. Sounds like, when I'm thinking back to Michael's question, it's very podcast Michael, as opposed to guest Michael. You never get this problem with Berenice, you say. This is just why it's such a cool name.
One day you'll meet that person.
You're going to find them for me, aren't you? They'll be out there somewhere. Don't apply, please. I like my uniqueness. So when Michael asked you about kind of working with youth, obviously you're not directly working, but it felt to me like it was a legacy, that you are leaving a legacy, a framework really, where people can then be better in future generations. And one of the things that I've mentioned a few times in the work of the podcast is that when people go, oh, well, it's for childless people, well, it's for everybody, because you may find your children could be childless, not by choice as well. So it's kind of like it's a filtering down of work. And I'm just wondering, in terms of the work you're doing, what do you hope will be better for future generations as a result of the work that you have done and your activism?
I just hope that people see us. When I say us, I mean, I'm talking about queer people as just people, and not as people who have to have labels. I'd like to think that when I say I'm in a relationship with a man, that people don't have to think, oh, you're a gay man in a gay relationship. I'm just married to Gregory, and that's our relationship. And I don't feel I need to have a label put on me, because I do everything the same as everyone else. And in my world, I am the same as everyone else. Whether I'm childless like other people, married like some other people, 56-year-old bald white man. That's not uncommon. These are things that a lot of us have in common, and there's nothing particularly different about me or anyone else. And I'd like people to think that when they come into this world and they live this world and they exit the world, that they've actually just been people and not been those people or different people. And you could just look at people around you as equals. And I'd like to think that I've had something to do with making people realize that we are just all people.
If the topic in this episode or any of our others chimes with you, you can get in touch with us on social media. You can find us on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn and Blue Sky, and we really appreciate your feedback. Childless Not by Choice listeners can carry on the conversation with us in our safe and inclusive space at the Full Stop online community. We are really proud that we are one of the very few childless spaces that welcomes men into the group. And for more details on how to join and to claim a free month's trial on us, please visit www.thefullstoppod.com. And we extend a huge thanks to the current members of our amazing online community. And it's because of them that we can keep the lights on for the podcast and look forward to giving back to the childless community as we grow.
Yeah, you mentioned in your introduction about people taking their lives, and I recall that one of the stats that I've learnt was that people are more likely, 2 times more likely to take their life by suicide than.
I think that's actually a lot higher than 2. I think it's
I
been
think
around
that's
10.
yeah.
Yeah.
Has it
But
really?
look, I think trans
Yeah.
people have a lot harder challenges in the world, particularly in places where you can't be open about your identity. And I think it's a lot harder because there's a lot of demonization of trans people, whether it's to do with sport or schools, or in America, to do with bathrooms and the most ridiculous, absolutely most ridiculous, idiotic issues about which bathrooms people use, which toilets people use. Trans people are not a threat. They are the ones that are most likely to be hurt.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
And I don't understand why people need to feel so threatened, how insecure some people can be. But nevertheless, I feel that I'd like to help the world understand that we aren't a threat. In fact, we might actually help keep your children happy and alive.
Yeah. And seen and heard.
Well, that's it, and productive, and go on to live meaningful lives as the people they want to be, rather than in some loveless relationship or some horrible circumstance where they aren't who they want to be. I mean, when you see people coming out in the ages of 50 or 60 as a transgender person, imagine how all those decades of having to hide themselves, or people who, in Australian rules football, we haven't yet had an out gay player. There are people that are gay who play football but are too scared to come out. I mean, that's absolutely ridiculous. We just recently had a man come out as a past player who was bisexual, and he's the first person in Australia who's come out in football as bisexual ever, which is quite remarkable and to be celebrated. Wonderful person. But only after he finished his career.
Yeah.
It says a lot. It really says a lot. Yet we've got amazing queer female representation in the Australian football AFL Women's League. And it's interesting that for women, it's a lot easier for them to come out and be who they are and openly be in their same-sex relationships or whatever. But men, it's still too much of a macho attitude. You see more things on a football field that you'd say are gay than you see off a football field, and yet these aren't men who can actually say that they could ever come out as gay. That's the ironic thing.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's very true, or very paralleled, I think, in this country and the UK as well. And those stats I was quoting was actually England. It's not kind of that was England stats. And that's kind of only what's known, I think, as well. But yeah, I think it's the same with the sport here. It's much more celebrated in women's football than I think it is elsewhere as well. I think that's very true. I'm not sure of other sports, but I would say that's true. It's changing, but it's taking a long time, and that's kind of the rules. It's kind of, and the historicness, and it's the labelling as well, as you say. Those labels are very hard to shake off, I think, if they were ever rightly applied in the first place as well.
I just wanted to touch on something that I saw in the news recently, this week, just gone, where King Charles had laid a wreath for some LGBT soldiers, maybe, which was quite touching and wonderful. But I look at the whole situation where the head of the Commonwealth there are many, many, many Commonwealth countries where it's illegal to be gay, and you could be quite easily sentenced to death in many countries, many Commonwealth countries, just for being gay. Africa is an amazing place, and there's a lot of diversity there, but in many countries it's criminal to be gay, and these are Commonwealth countries. And it's a travesty that the head of the Commonwealth doesn't speak out against the intolerance against queer people in Commonwealth countries, yet will put a wreath at the for LGBT people at some ceremony, but doesn't do anything meaningful, and I think that needs to be thought about.
Yeah, and actually, after decades of campaigning as well, that happened, and it really shouldn't take decades of campaigning for that to happen either. Yeah, yeah. So yes, I think the monarchy are trying to catch up, but it could be done with a little bit more awareness, a wider awareness, I think, of
and
what
enthusiasm.
That means. I think as well. Yes, agree. Yeah. Otherwise, it can become very tick boxy. Yeah, I've done that. Right. Let's carry on to the next thing. Yes. Yeah, I agree. Yeah, completely. Yeah. I was going to check that our audience don't have any questions for you as well, because I'm taking up a bit of space here. I'm asking you loads of questions.
I'm happy to answer the questions.
It's just so lovely to meet you after all this time, because I've heard so much about you from Michael, and of course I've read your article, the ABC News article as well. So it's really lovely to have you with us as well.
Thank you. I'm enjoying being here and being amongst you and people who understand it. It's always rewarding, because I find a lot of traveling in my life is that people don't necessarily understand what it's like to be in my shoes or in the shoes of people like us. It's quite a lonely journey at times, I must say.
Yes. Yeah. I think, would you say that when you have these parts of your lives, and again, this going back to labels again, and this kind of society having to sort of put people into boxes as well, it's quite hard to kind of, when you are out of the boxes and you're trying to make changes, that can feel quite lonely, I think, can't it?
Well, I mean, when I say us, I'm talking about people who are childless.
Okay.
You know, going through that part of my life, it's it's an empty part of my life, unfortunately. I find that really sad. The biggest thing for me is not that I'm childless, that people don't talk to me about it, or that don't talk or don't acknowledge it, or don't take any interest in where I've been in my desire to become a parent, and that's lonely and empty at times.
And would you say that's because there's this assumption,
you
said this before actually earlier on, but this assumption that you are gay, therefore you do not want children? It's that kind of attitude.
I don't even know if it's the want, it's perhaps the have, but perhaps there is that perhaps if I wasn't gay, people might, they might feel sorry for me. Oh, sorry, you've had no luck in becoming a parent. Sorry, we feel so sad for you, but because you're gay, it's either, well, what did you think? Or, or, maybe, you for one, I don't want to necessarily say this, but you deserve it, or whatever. But no, it's just in my circumstances, the same as anybody else's, and yet I don't hear from anybody about, how come you didn't have children, or did you ever want to be a parent? Are the things I'd like people to ask me, and that doesn't really happen.
Yeah,
for the most part. Rarely it does, and those are really in touch people, but I don't hear that very often.
Yeah.
It's a real double-edged sword, isn't it? I think it's kind of what some of the things that you've been talking about. It's a real double-edged sword. So the invisibility versus the holding hands with your partner in public and then being seen, and then the childlessness, and I guess people's assumptions. There's an awful lot that we've kind of talked around and unpacked in this, and it feels I'm sitting with an awful lot of sadness actually as I listen to us talk around things that are actually affecting real people here, but nobody really wants to have those difficult conversations. That's kind of the message.
My husband understands where I am in the world, but I find sometimes it's even hard to talk. He's like the most empathetic person I've ever met. He sometimes doesn't I don't know that he necessarily gets how I feel about this. And that's not because we can't talk about it or don't talk about it. I just don't think he gets it, because he's gone through a very difficult journey as a parent with his circumstances, where he effectively raised 2 children by himself, because his then wife and then ex-wife and now ex-wife had a lot of mental health challenges, so he kind of had to go through that parenting journey alone, and it was a very hard journey for him as a parent, which at many times he wanted to throw his hands up in the air and say, I'm done with it all, but he persisted, and he did amazingly. But I don't know that he necessarily gets quite how I feel about my circumstances. I don't know. I'm sure he does, and perhaps I'm, misrepresenting his views, but I just sometimes wonder. It's hard to sometimes talk about it because I don't think it's easy to talk about sometimes, whether it's him or me.
Yeah. Our previous guest, Meryl, who was on the previous podcast to this, had said that when you speak to one childless person, you speak to one childless person. And I do understand that, but there is, again, the parallels, the isolation. But yeah, you've got two very different lived experiences there, haven't you? Yourself and Gregory as well. Yeah.
Well, I mean, and he's one of 11 children. He comes from a
Oh my
huge
gosh.
family. I know,
Crikey.
he's 8.
Wow.
He's 8, so his parents certainly weren't childless. And he's one of 11 children who all became parents, and some had more children than others, and whatever, and they've all been conventional relationships. They all got married to opposite sex partners. They all had lots of children, etc., etc., etc. Perhaps he's the only one that's gone in that different direction, where he ended up marrying me, a man, after he married a woman. But it's been an interesting journey for him and for us, and as I became part of his family, his wider family too. Met many of his siblings, and I met his parents, and I was always Gregory's friend to his parents while they were alive because they were of a generation. But I think maybe they might have known, but it wasn't talked about. And I feel very comfortable around most of his family, the ones that we see. So they've accepted me into their lives, and similarly, Gregory has equally been accepted into my family's lives, although that's had its own separate set of challenges for different reasons, which we needn't explore here today. But, there's been a whole lot of good stuff in terms of our relationships, and I don't feel sad about that, but I do feel sad about childless situation that I find myself in at times when I'm around people who are prolific in their parenting and prolific in their joy for their children, and I find it sometimes challenging. And whilst I revel in their enthusiasm for their children, I can't parallel that. And I don't get from them the understanding that I'm not able to do that.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. That's landing. Yeah. It's an awful lot, I think. I know that I have a huge family as well, and other than my family, there's an isolation, I think, there, a loneliness, I think, in terms of kind of the wideness of a family and the bigness, and the fact that everyone is breeding and everyone can successfully have children, and so can their children, and so on and so forth. And that can be extremely overwhelming. I wanted just to go on, carry on, Michael. You carry on.
I worked once, one of the previous job I was in, with a wonderful person, and he and his wife hadn't been able to have children, and it really was painful to them, and I could see the pain in his heart when he talked about their childlessness, although he didn't use that word, but that they weren't parents. And he said every time he went to one of their family functions, he just felt that he didn't want to be there. He didn't feel part of it. He didn't feel connected. They felt different and empty. And I kind of said to him, I kind of feel that, without giving his name away. I feel that, and I understand where you're coming from because I'm in that similar situation. And whilst it wasn't the same, it was similar. Because I kind of understood that I wasn't also in that same situation, where I wasn't able to be a parent amongst my peers.
And I think when you know people for so long as well, I think whether that's a family that you're married into or a family that is your own, then I think there's that isolation. And it feels to me like there's layers of isolation. There is layers of isolation, I think, around in the childless community, but I'm just thinking that in terms of showing up and being childless, that actually I'm thinking about how few stories I hear and how few accounts I hear from people who have different diversities, different things they're bringing to the table, but don't talk about it because the childlessness can sometimes dominate too much. And there's other nuances to our childlessness and more diversity to be had within childlessness. It's childlessness, and then there's all this other stuff underneath it that comes in that impacts that journey and that label of childlessness.
I think that in most of our lives, for most people, the families seem to be a very important focus for many people. And understandably, for most people, it consumes their existence because children need and parents have to give, and sometimes the tables turn, but there's a lot of dependency, and so it's an important part of people's lives, but it's not the only thing. But we all have to live in a world where this happens, for better or for worse, and that kind of probably is why we're here today, because we are isolated from other people's experiences. We can't participate in the same way. I mean, I've just suffered through a week of this crazy disease called Halloween. Apologies to people who love Halloween, but I think it's a blight on the world. And I swear to you, it's one of the most evil things, just for its consumerism, absolute destruction of the planet. But put that aside, it's actually done some wonderful things. Like kids get together and do wonderful things, and families have parties, and it's like, that's really nice, but I wish they didn't do it with lollies and junk and all that stuff that's bad for the environment. Nevertheless, it resonated with me in a way that made me realize there's a lot of families doing things, parents doing things with kids, and that I wasn't in that world. Again, there's another one of those things that I can't be part of due to my circumstances. And I kind of had to reflect on that over the last week, knowing that I'd be coming onto this show today. But I thought about it, and I thought, that's interesting. My gym trainer was telling me how he's got a daughter who is coming into she's 3 or 4, or I think she's probably 4 coming up 4.5, and trying to explain to her what this is all about, and wanting it to be a better experience for her than it was for him, because growing up he kind of was scared of a lot of things, and he doesn't want her to become scared of things, and Halloween's a bit of a scary time. And he sort of doesn't. He's also very much into physical health and physical fitness, and so a lot of the lollies perhaps aren't a good thing, but I think he wants to break it to her gently. And he was telling me about this, and I was loving hearing him tell me about this, and I really got a lot out of that. But I also at the same time felt a bit distant from it all, because it wasn't part of what I could do in the world. But I don't have to dwell on that, and it doesn't make me feel sad, but I just think about it because it reminds me of my childlessness.
Yeah, the therapist that I was seeing a while ago said to me that there's just these things that can show up from time to time, and they hold up a mirror to the life that we could have had, and often we don't even expect them. And I felt some of that, I think, this year with Halloween, because I had sat here on Friday evening, as it was in the UK, with we've got some fairy lights or solar light things that sit just at the front of our house, and they're up all year round. They don't ever sort of go down, and they just add a little bit of brightness to the front of the house. And I thought, if anyone comes round that isn't in my street, they might think that we are we're welcoming. There's no pumpkin out, because that's kind of, I don't know if that's the same everywhere, but there's no pumpkin out, and that's usually the unspoken, if you've got a pumpkin, we can knock on your door. And in the past, I haven't got it on this door, I need to put it back, I had a bat door knocker. It's so cool, the bat door knocker, upside down bat with a wing out, and I thought that sounds a bit Halloweeny as well. And because we've had a new door put on, and I haven't put it back in because I'd love this door so much, I'm a bit worried about drilling holes into it. Anyway, that's another story. I thought, oh God, people are going to sort of think that maybe we do. And I thought, oh crikey, and the dog will just welcome anyone in. We have a dog, and she'll bark, but she'd welcome in a burglar, frankly. You could rob the joint with my dog. Don't do that, anyone, please, because you'll encounter me. But still, it's just kind of this whole thing of just this sat there thinking, oh God, the whole thing about just sitting and thinking, this is kind of something I'm not involved with. And I'd earlier cycled through Cambridge, and there's some streets near my house, and virtually every house has got Halloween decorations up, everything. no one came to my door. There wasn't actually any trick-or-treating in my street. And I was like, oh, thank God I live in this street, because it's slightly cut off from the other streets where it is full-on trick-or-treating. It literally is. It's just completely full of it, every house. And the kids are all starting to run up and down. They'd obviously all worked out their map. Everyone knew what they were doing. It just felt like the street was like a sugar high already. It really was. Just these feral children just going at everything. And obviously, lollipop sticks and everything like that, and sweets everywhere. And my street was just miserably goth, and no one came round. And it was like, yay for me. But I was worried about the back door knocker giving the wrong vibe, so I've never put it back on. But it is a mirror, isn't it? It's one occasion where you might not think that you're going to feel reflective, but it suddenly pops up and you're like, okay, this is very much, it's less about the gothicness of Halloween and more about the trick or the treating and the sugar and the plastic and the waste and the consumerism, I think, as well.
I think it's become more like Christmas, isn't it? Someone was telling me the other day that a friend had a tree, like a Christmas tree, but in Halloween colours, crackers, and there was something else as well. I can't remember what the other thing was, but I was like, that's just Christmas with a Halloween wrap around it, isn't it? So it then becomes a whole commercialised thing. And it's just like, ugh.
Yeah, but tomorrow, well, actually probably today, in fact, actually probably yesterday, you could get round to the shops and you could get cheap Halloween chocolate, but still, never mind, because they won't repurpose it for next year, because next year they'll rebrand it and do something else. But it's always the same. Why are they, it's like Christmas. You just don't keep it for next year. Don't buy new stuff. Why do people buy new stuff? I don't get it. I've no idea what I would buy new for Halloween, Christmas, or anything else. No. Anyway, we've gone completely off tangent. Sorry. This happens, Michael, quite frequently on the podcast.
Fine.
But
this has been so interesting. I was just sitting back listening. I could have listened for ages. I just think you've got so much to talk about, really. It's amazing.
Well, thank you. My world isn't consumed by my circumstances, but when I say circumstances, I mean, not being a parent. But I think in many ways my world is consumed by my being gay or being part of a queer community, because I feel that that's unavoidable. And I kind of get a lot out of being an ally to trans people, and I get a lot out of being an outspoken advocate in many ways, because I'm prepared to speak up at times when I'm, I don't fear retribution. I kind of am quite gutsy in many ways. I'm happy to take on people who feel it's their right to degrade and demean other people with their privilege, and call it out for what it is.
Good for you.
It's important to me. At the same time, this recent journey of being part of this childlessness community has been interesting for me, and I've found it's been helpful to me. And I'm grateful to Michael and his people who started that Facebook group, because that's helped me sort of crystallize my thoughts around not being a parent. I mean, I realize that there's a lot of people out there, I wasn't oblivious to it before, but a lot of people who are going through a lot of pain in their world because of their particular situation. And it must be very, very hard for a lot of people who really, really, really want to be parents and fit in with the world around them. And sometimes I think people feel that their God or their creator is making it difficult or hard for them. And I feel sorry that they feel that burden. I don't feel it that way, but I understand some people do, and I think they have to reconcile that with themselves and the communities they live in. It isn't easy necessarily, because I think a lot of communities, there demands conformity, and I think a lot of our lives are about conforming. There's even as a gay man, sometimes you're expected to conform. Sometimes I'm not all Kylie Minogue and feathers, trust me, but but yay to that. Why not? And why not?
Yeah.
And there's nothing wrong with having letting your hair down.
Yeah.
And I wish more people did.
I think that's very true, because I think it takes enormous courage, but also a lot of energy, I think, to push back against other people's dangerous rhetoric and speech and hate speech. I think that isn't perhaps talked about enough as to how much that can really just start to chip away at us. However strong we are, however brave that people can be, I think it can still just chip away, I think, at your energy. So I thank you for doing what you do.
No, not at all. Look, it means a lot to me to do all what I do. And, I do it with other people. And there are people who came before me who did a lot at personal expense. When it was illegal to be gay, or it was illegal to be whatever, and maybe people got beaten up by the police, and maybe people did go to jail, and maybe people did have all sorts of horrible things happen to them, so that they could be make lives better for the people who came after them, and I'm grateful to them.
Yeah, I find it quite astonishing when I think about growing up in the UK and how Section 28 was still around in the UK when I was growing up. And certainly that was very much on my mind. There's been a lot, I think, in the last year or so around Live Aid and about some of the ethical stuff around Live Aid and around, was that the right thing to do, the wrong thing to do? And the awareness of that struck me was also that it was at a time when there were people who were on stage who were not openly gay, and the reason for that was because of Section 28. And it's suddenly thought, crikey, that actually was actually when I grew up. I didn't realise that it was still around, and this is not something that's kind of, I guess for many people that, it's years ago because you're so old, but it's not.
Can you, for the other listeners, explain what Section 28 is?
I was going to. Yes, I will do. So it's a controversial law in the UK that was enacted only in 1988, and it prohibited local authorities from promoting homosexuality. So you couldn't actually teach this in schools at all. It wasn't part of any education. It led to a lot of censorship as well. So there is actually a generation, really a big generation of people growing up certainly in the UK, who would not know about this, who would not know about different types of families and different types of relationships because it was illegal to teach it. Yes. Which is, it was repealed in Scotland in 2000 and in England and Wales in 2003. 2003 is not that long ago.
No, not for a lot of us.
Yeah. So there's not very sobering, I think, to think that. I was just very aware of that when I was looking at some of the history from the 80s. I was doing a research project on something else around childlessness and contributing to that, and I went down this rabbit hole of what else was around at that time. And you tend to sort of think of like the 80s as being like, really kind of like pioneering, and actually in some ways it really, really wasn't.
It's actually interesting, just reflecting on something I heard in the news today, and they're talking about, perhaps on a slightly different topic, but China and China's declining population. It's interesting that there are people perhaps choosing not to be parents. It's an interesting world we see ourselves with. I think it's Japan and South Korea and other countries too, with decreasing populations. And the challenges that's going to bring to those communities. And in some ways it makes it harder for countries when they don't have a sustainable population. It's interesting.
Yes. Yeah, it does. Yeah, it's coming across in a lot of Europe as well. And this worry, and then begins from that, the blame game, without actually politicians perhaps being aware of the world in which we live in. And yes, in certain parts of the world, in America, there's a very big declining rate of people having children. It's dangerous right now, I think.
But it's worse for gay people to have children.
Yes. Oh, yes. We could go off down the rabbit hole there. But yes. Yes. Thank you so much for joining us today.
I've absolutely enjoyed it. Thoroughly enjoyed it. And look, it's been worth the wait, I have to say. It's been a while coming to today, and it almost didn't happen, but I'm really thrilled that we have been able to do this, have this conversation, and I've enjoyed participating very much.
Fantastic. We'll be in touch too, because people might want to catch up with you, and we'll pop some details in the show notes, because I'm sure people want to know more about your story and how to support you.
Happy to have people contact me, and if there's anyone that has any questions, I'm happy to write back to them and have a conversation.
Oh, fantastic. Thank you, Michael.
Thank you, Michael.
Thank you, Michael. I think I
Thank
find you so inspiring on a number of different levels, but we have a lot of people in our community that, they're always asking about what next, and listening to people like yourself who grab hold of something and go, right, this is my what next, or as Berenice said, this is going to be my legacy that I leave behind. Absolutely inspirational. Thank you.
Oh, well, look, thank you, and I hope I have made it easier for some people, and if anyone wants to reach out, by all means, connect with me.
Thank you. We've had a lovely comment in the chat that just says, from one of our audience, who says that very much enjoyed hearing your thoughts. You put complex ideas into words brilliantly, and you're a great communicator. And just thanks for hearing from you and for your passion for what you do.
Oh, well, that's really touching. So thank you to that lovely listener. Appreciate that very much.
Thanks for listening. We hope you found our conversation with Michael as engaging and empowering as we did. We'd love to hear from you if you found this topic interesting and want to know more about Michael's work. If you'd like to find out more about our podcast, or you have a great idea for a topic we've not covered, or you just want to know more about, we'd love to hear from you. We want this podcast to have as many voices from across our community as possible, so if something's missing or you just want a deeper dive on it, let us know. You can find us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter and LinkedIn. You can also become a member of our online community, which is a safe and inclusive space for anyone that's a member of the Childless community. More details available on our website at www.thefullstoppod.com. You can also sign up to our listeners list at the website, which keeps you up to date on what we're up to, and if you'd like to, you can also donate to our work too. As always, it's important for us to remind you, you're not alone.
Oh, and I'm due to come down to Melbourne sometime next year, so I'm going to hit you up for a coffee.
Please,
but
you've been threatened
I'm
for
worried.
ages.
I'm worried you'll have no time for me.
No. I make time for people. I do make time for people. A lot of time. Absolutely. I want to meet you, Michael, for sure, and all of you, to be honest. So
when we eventually get there, Sarah and I are working on it.